All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. I firstly want to start by apologizing for not having uploaded a video in quite a while. So, last time you saw me, I was in Key West with Ben. We are now back home in lovely Charleston. So, it's been about 2 months since I started doing this, and I'm back home for just a little while, and then right around the beginning of June is when I'm going to pick up traveling again. I'm going to start going up the East Coast, up towards Maine, since we've already covered going down south all the way to Key West. So, in the meantime, while I'm here, I wanted to just do like sort of a little review, pros and cons, the good and the bad of what it's been like so far. It's been overall a really positive experience, and I personally am really excited to get back on the road. So, without further ado, these are the best things about living in a van and the worst things. Starting off with the good stuff. Number one, which I guess is pretty obvious to most people that have or haven't done this, is the freedom that comes with it. So, of course, coming from high school and then college and then straight into this, I've never really lived alone. I've always, been with my parents, siblings, roommates, stuff like that. And even though it is a small space, being able to have a space I can call mine, that I can live how I choose to in, it's something really sort of new and kind of awesome that I'm really enjoying. And of course, the fact that it's on four wheels means that I can take it pretty much wherever I want to. So I can wake up one day and the only thing I really have to worry about is, finding a place to stay for the night, which I actually haven't had any trouble doing at all since I started this. I'll just find, like a Planet Fitness parking lot is where I most commonly stayed, or like Walmart, some Publixes, Cracker Barrels, which I haven't even had to stay at yet. It really hasn't been too much trouble. And of course, I've also stayed at, paid spots like little RV campgrounds, KOA sites, state park campsites, stuff like that, maybe 15 to 30 bucks a night, depending on where you are. Don't do that every day, of course, but once in a while when my battery's running low and I don't feel like driving to charge it, or if I want to fill up my water tank, somewhere that's not a gas station, or just want like a nice, safe place to stay for the night where I don't have to really think about, people coming up to me, messing with me, which I haven't experienced so far, by the way, which is nice. But places like that are a nice luxury, when you're living a lifestyle like this. So it really hasn't been too hard finding spots, and hopefully that will continue to be true as I make my way up the East Coast. But yeah, overall, it just feels really nice to be able to wake up sort of wherever you want to be, I guess, within reason, and then be able to, throughout your day, go visit cool places in the town that you're staying in, see cool landmarks, and then have a plan to go, to the next town over the next day, and you don't have anything really anchoring you down. But yeah, just being able to start your day truly on your own agenda. Sometimes I'll just wake up and have a relaxed day, make breakfast, whip out the guitar, mess around with it, and do some reading, watch movies and stuff. A lot of things that I told myself I would do on this trip that I wouldn't otherwise have had time to do if I started working right away. And it's fulfilling, is really what it comes down to. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and talk about the second good thing about living this lifestyle, and that is the affordability. Now, I know this factor can be totally dependent on your lifestyle, how you choose to live and how you choose to use your money. For me, I worked for about 6 months to save up for this, bought the van, which I am still paying on, and as of right now, I'm running off of those work savings completely, so I don't have any source of income at the moment. So being able to live on a budget is important to me so that I can live like this as long as possible. I haven't done an exact cost breakdown of like my month to month expenditures, but the three things that I have spent the most money on since starting this is gas, groceries, and the van payment itself. So I definitely could have stayed home longer to work more and get the van paid off before I started actually doing this, but to be honest, I was impatient. I really wanted to start this, and the payment is about $400 a month, which as of right now, I can definitely afford, along with, gas and the other essentials. It's not too bad. I've been fine so far. So that on top of groceries, which I'd say I spend around $200 to $250 a month on, and then gas, which is my biggest expense. I spend about $40 to fill up the tank. It gets me around 300 miles. It's actually pretty efficient on gas, about 30 miles to the gallon if I stay, 55 miles an hour or so on the back roads, which is usually what I take. Coming down into Florida, I spent about 300 bucks on gas. And since I stayed at my aunt and uncle's house for quite a while, I wasn't driving around too much. So the only other time I had to spend a lot on gas was on the way back up, which was probably about $200 or so, since I went straight up to South Carolina instead of sort of zigzagging down and making a bunch of stops like I did initially. In the future, if I'm driving more on a daily basis and I'm traveling more, covering more ground, that will obviously increase. But for the time being, it's a manageable expense, and the van has shown to do really well on fuel. It's not anywhere near as expensive as some of these other rigs that I've seen people live in. So as far as budgeting goes, this thing makes it pretty easy to do that. I'd say I'm spending about $800 to maybe $1,000 a month, which compared to living in an apartment or a house is a lot lower. $800 to $1,000, and that is absolutely everything. So if you can be okay with living in a small space like this, the savings that you get out of it is definitely worth it. But with that being said, I'll go ahead and move on to the next thing that I have learned to love about living in a van, is that it has really, really taught me to be less materialistic and to be okay with having less things, which has actually really improved my quality of life. So, of course, the average person has quite a lot of belongings. I was able to get rid of a lot of my stuff, and what I did end up bringing with me in the van is everything that I need, and I really haven't noticed that there's something at home like, oh man, I forgot I could really totally use that, I mean, aside from maybe a couple things that I just forgot to bring, but other than that, it's really been great just knowing exactly what you have, where it is, and you don't have to go very far to look for it. The minimalism has, I guess, somewhat resensitized my dopamine receptors in a way, but it has really helped me to appreciate and notice the smaller things in life that I guess typically go unnoticed because there are so many material distractions in our day-to-day lives. Anyways, with that being said, there are plenty of other great things about living this lifestyle that I've discovered, like meeting all kinds of cool, crazy people and encounters that you wouldn't have otherwise had if you weren't in the right place at the right time. But of course, with all of those good positives about living a lifestyle like this, there are, of course, plenty of sacrifices you make and risks that you take on by doing something like this. The biggest sacrifice that I've had to make is a commanded, ordered structure, I guess is how I'll say it. And what I mean by that is a routine or a structure that is set by a lot of things, by your work, by your hobbies, by your friends and family and stuff like that. And when you have something like that to sort of reinforce and structure your routine at all times, it can be pretty easy to have a routine, you're used to it. You get accustomed to sort of the same thing every day, which can be really healthy and really good. And I actually do like being in a rhythm like that. And so with this type of lifestyle, it almost completely contradicts that. And you are forced to, by your own will and strength and willpower, you have to create your own structure and your own rhythm, which, for me, I'm not really familiar with because my whole life, my structure has been sort of decided for me through, first high school and then college and then work before I did this. And so now, for the first time, I have to create my own structure by myself, which I'm excited to do, but also is harder than I thought it would be. You don't have somebody telling you where you have to be, what you have to do, and when you have to do it. And so if you want to be a productive human, which I really would like to be, I have to do it all by my own mental strength, and some days it's just not easy. But I don't think I would trade it for anything else because I'm getting better at it. I'm learning to sort of create my own rhythm, and I'm learning what works for me and what doesn't. And it's a cool experience. I'm learning a lot about myself that I probably wouldn't have otherwise learned. So I guess what I'm saying is the inherent lack of structure that accompanies this lifestyle is actually, helping me learn how to do this completely on my own, which I feel like by the time I'm pretty well into this, I'll be really, really good at being able to do productive, rewarding tasks for myself every day that I know are helping me work towards the long-term goals that I have. But anyways, with that being said, the next, I guess, downside of living a lifestyle like this that is truly a downside is that it's just dangerous. It is much more dangerous than a typical conventional, living in a house lifestyle. Not only is it dangerous to constantly be driving, you also run the risk of just running into anybody when you're parked. Your car is your home, so there's always the risk that it could get broken into and you could lose everything. So, and of course, I've gone into this thinking about that, and tried my best to, take precautions and find places that are safe, that I know to be safe, and use my best judgment when I'm trying to find spots to stay for the night. But yeah, it's certainly risky. I haven't had any negative experiences with running into anybody that means harm, thankfully, and hopefully it'll continue to be that way. But yeah, you're not as protected. You're just not. And like I mentioned, driving a second ago, you are on the road like 10 times more than you would be if you were living conventionally, and you run the risk of just you have a higher chance of getting into a wreck. Again, thankfully I haven't had any accidents or even really close calls. This thing is pretty slow, so pretty easy for me to see up ahead when something could be happening, so I can slow down and really pay attention. So I've been doing well about my driving, best I can at least. So as long as you're diligent, with your driving, you're confident in your skills, you pay attention on the road, and you also just, don't be naive to your surroundings. Don't think that you're safe. You can learn to still enjoy yourself while being aware of what's going on around you, I guess is the best way to say it. And with that being said, I'll move on to, I guess, the last thing that I had in my mind about the negative side of living in a van. And this is probably a common one, and that is you're living in a car and cars break down, you know? So you have to be really, really diligent about your maintenance, making sure that you have services to help you out, if you ever get into a situation where you need it. Yeah, things can always go wrong. So thankfully, I haven't had anything crazy happen yet with this van. It's been pretty solid so far. I don't have solar panels up there. I charge my battery solely through driving. So if I ever break down, I'm kind of stuck in that aspect. So like I said, I haven't had a problem with yet, but I also haven't been doing this for too long. So it's bound to happen at some point, but maybe not, who knows? This Toyota is pretty good, but it's just something that you got to be aware of, and you got to hope for the best but expect the worst type of deal. So I've got, my tools and whatever really I can bring, emergency kit and stuff like that for whatever might happen. But as long as you use your best judgment and make sure that you can get the proper assistance when and if you need it, you're usually set. In this case, with this van, it's a little different, because sometimes it can be hard to even find those parts to replace them, since this thing's from Japan. But like I said, I haven't had to do anything like that yet. Most of the preventative maintenance that I did on this thing was done before I started, so I was able to order parts and wait for it and throw those in before I ever started doing this. And hopefully I won't have to do anything major throughout the duration of this trip. But like I said, you never know. You always got to prepare for the worst. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all I had in mind in terms of like pros and cons of living in a van. Yeah, overall, this has been an amazing 2 months. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm sorry that I didn't showcase more of it, but really a lot of it was just me learning to create my own rhythm and my own day-to-day, by my own will lifestyle. And it's harder than I thought it would be. But the feeling that you get as a result of, learning to establish that rhythm is really nice. And you feel very accomplished to be learning how to do something like this on your own. So yeah, I wouldn't trade it for anything. I can't wait to get back on the road, probably right at the start of June. Like I said, I'll be making my way up the East Coast towards Maine, and the videos are not going to stop. So for the time being, in about a week, I'm going to Scotland with my mom. I'm going on a big hike with her, and I will be filming that, and I'll make maybe like one big kind of montage video, or maybe I'll split it up and do a few videos. I'll see. So for those that are interested in that, I know it's not, van life related, but still a journey nonetheless, and should be pretty interesting. You guys will be seeing one more YouTube video though before I go to Scotland, and that will be about why I chose this type of van specifically for van life over, something more typical, I guess. And then after the Scotland videos, I'm probably just going to do, a few videos here and there while I'm in Charleston, just going to various campsites. Maybe I'll stay a night at the neighborhood dock, yeah, just a few little, I guess, side quests you could call it before we finally hop back on the road again. So just hang in there until then, and appreciate you guys sticking around and following along, even though you haven't had much to follow. I'm definitely going to be more consistent with those videos once I get back on the road. And I want to thank you guys for being here. Thank you for watching, and I will see y'all in the next one. Peace.